To understand the subatomic world, we build massive, frigid machines. We bury them underground, accelerate particles to a fraction of the speed of light, and smash them together to map what reality is actually made of. 3,000 years ago, ancient Indian sages took the exact opposite approach. They didn't look outward through lenses or detectors. They looked inward through rigorous meditation, documenting the nature of existence through pure observation. The physicists who defined the laws of quantum mechanics didn't view these ancient texts as primitive mysticism. When their own mathematical discoveries began to defy classical logic, they actively turned to these specific scriptures for answers. Niels Bohr, the architect of the atomic model, stated explicitly that he went into the Upanishads to ask questions about his own work. Werner Heisenberg, the father of the uncertainty principle, struggled to reconcile the bizarre behavior of subatomic particles. Seeking clarity, he spent time in India discussing physics with the poet Rabindranath Tagore. Heisenberg later recalled that after his conversations with Tagore, the quantum ideas that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. The ancient traditions provided the exact conceptual basis he needed. Erwin Schrödinger relied heavily on Vedanta, the ancient Hindu philosophy. He integrated its concepts of unified consciousness directly into his foundational book, What is Life? J. Robert Oppenheimer learned Sanskrit in 1933, specifically so he could read the Bhagavad Gita in its original, untranslated form. The creators of modern physics had hit a conceptual wall. To comprehend the mathematics they had just written, they required the philosophical scaffolding laid down thousands of years earlier in India. For 3 centuries, Western science operated on a strict assumption: matter is primary. The universe is built from physical atoms and forces. If you arrange that matter in complex enough ways, like in a human brain, consciousness eventually emerges as a byproduct. The Vedic worldview inverts this entirely. In their texts, consciousness is primary, and physical matter is secondary. They described a state called Brahman, an infinite, omnipresent, and self-aware field that acts as the true foundation of all existence. Reality, in this model, is not a collection of static, solid objects. It is an active field of pure awareness that temporarily condenses into form by observing itself. The universe is a continuous oscillation, a rhythmic breathing between unmanifest potential and physical reality. If we hold on to the idea that the universe is made of solid, independent blocks, the subatomic world is illogical. But if we accept this inverted framework, where a unified field of mind precedes matter, the rules of quantum mechanics begin to align perfectly. When physicists look closely at subatomic particles like electrons or photons, they do not find tiny, solid spheres. They find waves of probability vibrating across a quantum field. Millennia before we possessed the mathematics to prove it, the Vedas described the physical universe as pure vibration, emerging entirely from a single primordial frequency. One of the ancient Vedic schools, the Vaisheshika Darshana, detailed a concept called the Anu. The Anu is described as having no measurable properties, no magnitude, no definite shape, and no fixed location in time or space. It remains pure potential until it interacts with other forces to form perceivable physical reality. Modern academic researchers are now mapping these ancient descriptors directly to our current understanding of cosmology and quantum field theory. They note striking similarities between the ancient concept of akasha, a dynamic, omnipresent ether that supports matter, and the modern concept of the quantum vacuum. Through meditation and pure observation, the ancient sages documented the probabilistic, non-solid nature of matter, entirely bypassing the need for modern instruments. If seeing the bridge between ancient philosophy and modern physics is shifting your perspective on reality, take a second to hit subscribe. Let's look at how deep this goes. The double-slit experiment reveals the most perplexing mechanism in physics. A particle exists in a state of superposition, occupying all possible states simultaneously until an observer measures it. Only then does it settle into a definite reality. The act of measurement alters the system. The wave of infinite potential collapses into a localized particle strictly because it is observed. This led physicist John Wheeler to propose a participatory universe, where the physical world does not exist independently of observation. In Wheeler's view, the observer and the observed are locked together, actively bringing reality into existence through their interaction. The Vedas defined this exact dynamic using the term Maya. Often misunderstood as the idea that the physical world is fake, Maya actually describes the illusion of separation. It is the appearance of individual, separate objects that occurs when infinite consciousness observes itself into temporary form. What physicists calculate mathematically as wave function collapse is the precise mechanism the Upanishads described. The observer, the act of observing, and the object being observed are a single unified process. Albert Einstein fiercely resisted some of the implications of quantum mechanics. He rejected what he called spooky action at a distance. Yet experiments proved that quantum entanglement is real. Two particles can become entangled so that even if they are separated by billions of light years, they instantly mimic each other's states. They communicate with zero delay, completely ignoring the physical boundaries of space. Thousands of years earlier, the Chandogya Upanishad stated its ultimate truth, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. It means you are not an isolated entity sitting inside a disconnected universe. You are the universe experiencing itself. Erwin Schrödinger recognized that his equations pointed to this exact truth. He actively used the concepts of Vedanta to argue against the Western assumption that human beings possess separate, individual consciousnesses. He concluded that the notion of plural, separate minds is a deception. He compared it to a gallery of mirrors, where the same unified reality appears fractured, much like seeing the identical mountain peak from different valleys. Both quantum entanglement and Vedanta arrive at the same destination. The physical distance between objects and the boundary between individual minds are mathematical and philosophical illusions. We are not looking at a conflict between ancient spirituality and modern science. We are reading two distinct languages describing the exact same architecture of reality. The ancient sages isolated this unified field through disciplined internal meditation. Modern physicists confirmed it through rigorous external mathematics. But what happens when we stop treating this as a philosophical parallel and begin applying this 3,000-year-old framework to cutting-edge technology? Right now, elite scientific institutions are designing experiments to detect the lingua cosmica, the literal physical fields of human consciousness. The data they gather will close the gap between mind and matter permanently. Make sure to watch Part 2 to see exactly how they are doing it. Part 1 revealed how quantum wave function collapse mirrors ancient Vedic philosophy. But this parallel goes far deeper than individual particles. It applies to the actual fabric of space itself. For centuries, classical physics treated the vacuum as a dead, empty void, a silent backdrop where matter and energy simply took place. The Vedas describe the universe not as solid matter, but as akasha, an omnipresent substrate of sound. They identified a primordial frequency called Om, from which all physical form emerges and eventually returns. Modern quantum field theory has proven this substrate exists. When physicists look at the empty vacuum, they find a seething field of energy where particles constantly oscillate into and out of existence, a modern validation of that ancient primordial vibration. This specific parallel was a central focus for 20th century physicist David Bohm. Bohm proposed the implicate order, a theory suggesting the entire universe is permeated by a hidden field of consciousness. In his model, physical reality is simply that consciousness folding into form, exactly as the Vedas described the Akasha. Space is not an empty divide separating us. It is the unified, connective tissue of a single conscious field. Our understanding of time is undergoing a similar deconstruction. The standard Western model is a straight line, a singular beginning leading to a singular end. This diagram represents the Vedic alternative, kalpas and yugas. This model views cosmic history as a series of vast, recurring cycles of creation and destruction. While the Big Bang explains our local genesis, it represents only one phase of a much larger circular process. Modern astrophysics is increasingly moving toward this oscillatory model. The theory of a pulsating universe that expands and contracts matches the rhythmic cycles recorded by sages thousands of years ago. Cosmic history is not a straight line toward a dead void. Rather, it is an eternal breathing cycle. Records from the early 20th century show that the founders of quantum mechanics were actively studying Vedic texts to make sense of their own discoveries. In 1929, Werner Heisenberg traveled to India to meet with the poet and philosopher Rabindranath Tagore. Heisenberg later confessed that Tagore's explanations of Indian philosophy provided great comfort. They made the crazy ideas of relativity and interconnectedness in his math finally seem logical. Erwin Schrödinger, who created the fundamental wave equation of quantum mechanics, was a lifelong student of Advaita Vedanta. Schrödinger used these texts to argue against separable interacting material particles, viewing separate consciousnesses as Maya, an illusion of plurality. His work was anchored in the Vedic realization of Atman equals Brahman. The personal self is identical to the cosmic self. We're diving into the mathematics next, so if you're finding this connection as fascinating as these physicists did, hit the subscribe button. The pioneers of the atomic age required ancient Eastern mysticism to process the reality their own scientific equations were describing. This intersection remains a subject of active, peer-reviewed research in modern academia. Mathematician Dr. Paul Karaza has utilized Maharishi Vedic science to solve fundamental contradictions in ZFC set theory. Karaza's wholeness axiom provides a mathematical proof for the concept of unified wholeness. It demonstrates how infinite mathematical structures mirror the Vedic collapse of infinity into a single self-referential point. Currently, at the IIT Mandi IKS MHA Center, researchers are developing the theory of quantum emotion. Using quantum machine learning to analyze high-frequency neural signals, they are investigating whether consciousness functions as a non-local informational field beyond the biological brain. Modern research is moving toward a view where consciousness is not a byproduct of biology, but a conserved foundational structure of the universe itself. The quantum vacuum, Heisenberg's uncertainty, and the wholeness axiom tell the same story across 3,000 years. The universe is not a dead machine, and you are not a passive observer separate from what you see. The collapse of the wave function, the oscillation of the quantum field, and the primordial vibration of Ohm represent the exact same fundamental process. The universe is waking up to observe itself. We are the cosmos made conscious. Separation is an illusion. You are the field. If this reshaped your perspective, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe. Let us know in the comments which ancient tradition we should decode next.